I also believe that the joke, moving on to another topic regarding humor, has to do with the degree of happiness one has. A person who is unhappy can hardly laugh at any joke or make any jokes. There is, for me, a relationship of equivalence between the degree of happiness one has with one's life and humor.
Hey, hello, dear friends of Kabbalah Podcast. We are again with Mario Sabán.
How are you, Nacho? A great pleasure.
A pleasure, Shalom Mario. Well, we can say that today we have a nice topic.
The truth is that we are going to laugh a lot. I'm afraid of so much laughter. Yes, because I hope we won't have to stop laughing so much.
Yes, I'm afraid too. Maybe it's true. Too much laughter can take us to unknown places of uncontrol. Well, Mario, there is one thing we fortunately share, which is a sense of humor.
Yes, it's true.
Today it's our turn to discuss humor and Kabbalah. The second part of the title, I think it is also very interesting that it has to do with whether spirituality should be solemn, isn't it?
Absolutely, of course. Kabbalah has Jewish roots, and Jewish humor, you know this, is very ancient. And there are many Jewish comedians in the United States and people who have worked extensively with humor. There is a tremendous amount of humor. Yes, you know, humor has even been analyzed as a method of survival, where you relativize a tragic situation and understand it from the angle of humor. Freud wrote in one of his books about jokes and their relationship with the unconscious. It seems to me that according to the Kabbalists, there's a very direct connection between wisdom and humor. Yes, because in a certain way, humor serves as an indirect or sometimes direct critique of the ideas we cling to. It's a way of relativizing the ideas we hold, and it becomes a weapon against idolatry, because it's essentially attacking, or in a way, criticizing something you take for granted as normal within your cultural group or your social group. For example, there are many jokes about Jews, about Galicians, about Catalans, about the French, and the question is, why? Why do we take the cultural traits that define each group and turn them into jokes? And interestingly, many of these jokes actually originate within the groups themselves. In other words, it's a form of self-criticism that the cultural group directs at itself about a certain imbalance or a virtue taken to an extreme or simply a non-virtuous imbalance. But it's really fascinating how many jokes there are, and don't even get me started on religious jokes. When I travel with any of my groups, there is something we cannot skip with my guide Liliana Volpi, to whom I send warm greetings, which is our daily joke session during the trip. We dedicate about half an hour almost every day to telling humorous stories, and honestly, it's incredible. And why? Because jokes loosen things up. Jokes open the atmosphere. A life taken too seriously becomes irresponsible. It is the irresponsibility of so much responsibility. And this is what humor does. It allows you to offer criticism from a light-hearted angle. It's very beautiful because sometimes a direct and very serious critique can even become aggressive. And of course, we're not talking about aggressive jokes. True humor is not aggressive at all. You take part in the humorous process and you enjoy it. It's not designed to attack anyone. If it were, then we would indeed have a problem. Instead, this kind of humor, which I would call very healthy, brings the clipo, the imbalances to the surface, but in a gentle way because it's playful. And very often, Through a joke or a humorous moment, one becomes aware of some dimension of their personality that needs work.
Regarding what you're telling me, and after doing a bit of research on the relationship between humor, Judaism, and tradition, I came across some concepts. For example, one of them is that, according to Baal Shem Tov, humor is that which guides a person's mind from a place of narrow consciousness to a place of expanded consciousness. Another point that struck me strongly regarding humor is what Psalm 126 says, that in the Messianic era, quite literally, our mouths will be filled with laughter. So perhaps laughter is not just a reaction, but a spiritual movement, one that opens the heart, loosens the rigid structures of the ego.
It's beautiful and true. Look, notice that one of the legends, one of the narratives found in Kabbalistic tradition regarding the divine, which must of course be interpreted symbolically, says that the Ein Sof, the infinite God, played with the Leviathan before creating the universe. That is, it's as if he said, well, I'm going to create a universe as a kind of playful act, enjoying myself, and in the midst of that joy, creation happens. And that, of course, carries a great deal of meaning. There is also profound creativity within humor, and I really like what the Baal Shem Tov said, because notice,
Yes?
restricted consciousness corresponds to the realm of Bina, the left side of the tree of life, while expanded consciousness corresponds to Chokmah, the masculine and expansive aspect. And what he is essentially saying is that we move from Binah to Chokmah. We move toward wisdom, a topic we have already explored. The sage is the one who can make a joke because he will not be offended by himself, by his own self-critique, since humor involves a great deal of self-criticism, and within that self-criticism one grows. Sometimes self-critique can be serious, and sometimes it can be playful and filled with laughter.
Of course.
But in the end, it's a very healthy form of self-criticism. And so if you're enjoying yourself and at the same time gaining something from that self-critique, I would say that's even better. You're getting a double benefit. You're working on the message in a playful, light-hearted way, and that's really beautiful. I believe humor is also connected to our imperfections, to our limits. Notice who are the ones who lack humor. People who have no sense of humor are often quite suspicious. Usually they're hiding imbalances, people who haven't done their inner work and who feel offended by a joke because
Authoritarian and dogmatic people.
Yes, of the authoritarian dogmatists. Let's not even talk about them. It is impossible because
They can't stand it.
it's like an offense, you could say. A direct offense, unless really it isn't. I mean, I would separate the jokes that are genuinely offensive, which I wouldn't even consider humor. They're just aggression disguised as a joke. But a dogmatic person can interpret any joke as an aggression. Sometimes, for example, I make many playful jokes that people on social media don't even understand and get offended by. There have been comments from people who were really offended. I often say, boys, girls, or whatever you are, on social media, and the other day, a bunch of people jumped at it. You can't do that. As Dr. Sabán says, people aren't lighthearted. They don't understand humor. They don't understand sarcasm. Some topics, you see, in humor, you can talk about all topics as long as there's no real offense. But watch out for the dogmatic person. The dogmatic person is so closed in their own reality that when you make a joke, they don't understand the sarcasm. You understand? So it seems to me that this lack of humor also implies a lack of inner freedom. Of course.
I can think of two things. One with a kind of headline, which is that for me, spirituality should not be solemn, but humor is a serious thing. This is a phrase, isn't what? The humor is a serious thing. It's a phrase that obviously doesn't belong to me. I don't remember who it belongs to. But it seems to me to be very appropriate for this. And then there is another thing that I was also reflecting on while you were speaking, that there is a relationship between the Kabbalah and humor. From the perspective that every good joke, there is a part of the joke, for it to be good, that is hidden. That is, for something to be funny to you, there is something that is not being said, but is being revealed through the joke.
Of course, totally. That is, there is a revelation in the joke, but it is not a revelation we could call direct. It is more like an indirect revelation, because that little bit of humor allows that revelation to enter, whereas if it had been very serious, the person might have felt offended. It would have been direct. So, if I say something to you playfully, we both laugh. But if I say it seriously, you might put up a defense system thinking, oh God, we could get into conflict because they are saying something to me. And suddenly, through the joke, I am saying it, but we are having fun. And you accept it because there is no tension in the situation. That is, through the joke. This is why I said earlier, it relaxes things, and you can say, look, in the Middle Ages, there was a figure like this. In the Middle Ages, there were two types of personality. If you criticized the king or the feudal lord, you went straight to the gallows, directly. That is, if you said to the feudal lord, I don't obey you, look, you don't command me, you were out, to the cell or to the gallows. But there was a character who was hired by the feudal lord, the king, who was the jester.
Who was allowed to do everything.
The jester had everything allowed. He could jump on the table. He could make jokes to the king. I mean, look how interesting, isn't it? I mean, if it was serious, it was the death penalty. But if you're hired in an environment of freedom, the jester could make jokes to all the nobles, including the king.
Was the freest person.
Sure, but look how funny it was to hire the jester. What a need society had. And jokes seemed to be the solution.
The escape valve.
Of course, the jester was the escape valve.
Of repression.
Yes, of the repression of what could not be said to the feudal lord.
The jester was the voice of the people.
Exactly. That's why the jester was key. Now, in the Jewish world, we all became jesters. Exactly. That is the good part. Instead of having just one jester, each of us has an inner jester.
Nice, Mario. One thing, listen to me. Yes, I liked it. If you allow me and give me a few seconds, I'll tell you a joke. We'll be back in 15 seconds. Hey, Mario. You're looking tan from the lights. What's going on with you?
I don't see you. Who are you?
Here, I am Nacho.
Oh, hey, Nacho. How are you? This light is killing me. I need sunglasses.
Listen, there's another eye watching us. There are a lot of people back there. Hey, you, over there on the other side. Give it a like, subscribe, and join us. And if you want to collaborate in a more active way, here there is a QR that allows you to help us to continue and keep doing this podcast. You also have it in the link below in the comments. And on this Patreon, you'll find an online Kabbalah course in English to help transform your life and become happier. Mario, next time?
Sunglasses. Umbrella.
Yes, umbrella. Well, Mario, here we are again. As you told me you were going to allow me.
I hope it does not offend anyone.
No, don't worry. It's a nice joke, but one with which I feel very identified, and I think my wife will attest to that identification. There happened to be a couple of elderly people of Jewish origin. So Rebecca reproaches Moses and says to him, Moses, you never bought me a blouse, you never bought me a shirt. You never bought me a pair of pants, you never bought me a skirt, you never bought me shoes. Then Moses turns around and says, I didn't know you sold clothes. I laugh. My wife doesn't laugh so much.
But well, you laugh?
I laugh because I identify with Moses in that sense. But I think it's a soft joke.
There are many jokes. Look, there is another joke that I remember very well, the one about the grandmother in New York with her 2 Jewish grandchildren. Do you know this joke? Then a lady says, oh, her grandchildren, look, how old are they? Who? The architect or the lawyer? Yeah, and one is 4 and the other 2 years old. That is to say, they are the pretension, aren't they? The grandmother's cultural pretension. One is going to be a lawyer and the other is going to be a lawyer. But these jokes, if you analyze them, reveal something about the cultural expectations a grandmother has for her grandchildren. But there are incredible jokes. There's another joke I remember now about a Jewish woman in New York who had 3 children. Yes, 2 of them were very successful financially, and the other one was a rabbi with a modest salary. So one son, the lawyer, buys her a huge yacht, the other, the businessman, buys her a huge plane, and the rabbi says, "I can't afford a yacht." Then he says, "Well, you know what? I'll teach a parrot the entire Torah by heart." And he does, and the parrot learns the entire Torah. In the end, he gives her the parrot, and she meets with her sons. She says, "The yacht and the plane were nice, but nothing compares to that chicken my rabbi son brought me." Yeah, that's it. There are many jokes that are very interesting. There are also serious studies on humor. One by Reich, if I'm not mistaken, who was a psychoanalyst, studied Jewish humor and humor in general. That's why I was talking about the role of the jester in relation to what is revealed through jokes, which I think is very interesting. And I reiterate, I also believe that jokes, moving to another topic related to humor, are connected to the degree of happiness a person has. An unhappy person is unlikely to laugh at jokes or make jokes. For me, there is a correlation between the level of happiness in one's life and the ability to appreciate humor. An unhappy person has less capacity to engage with humor. They may feel offended or perceive a joke as an aggressive critique. Humor becomes an outlet, revealing a lot about someone's inner state based on how they react to a joke. I say this because, for example, just a couple of weeks ago, I made a sarcastic comment on social media, and many people felt offended and went on high alert. Ultimately, what this shows is that humor is not merely a tool for amusement or entertainment, but a profound mechanism through which we can explore our own limitations, challenge our rigid thinking, connect with others in moments of vulnerability, and transform potentially tense or defensive situations into opportunities for insight, growth, and shared joy, revealing
put on alert.
layers of consciousness.
Of course.
So I also believe that culturally, within the Jewish world, there is a very high tolerance for humor, which perhaps is not as well known in other cultures that don't share this playful approach. And it seems to me that when someone tells a joke, even a sarcastic one, the joke pushes you out of your comfort zone. The joke moves your comfort zone because it suddenly reveals things you might not want to be revealed. And that's the power of true humor.
Humor has a connection with something very deep, which is the concept of joy. And joy? Well, here I also noted while preparing the talk in Isaiah 55:12, the verse says, "You will go out in joy." And of course, I believe that within Jewish thought, joy is very, very important. Remember, for example, the song Abba Nagila, Abba, I think it's a good example.
Absolutely, very important. Imagine, for example, the Breslov movement, which is a movement full of joy. Despite being orthodox in its design, it is followed by thousands of non-orthodox people who follow it solely because of the joy. They associate joy with Emunah, with trust. That is, absolute trust allows one to experience joy. I am aware and I agree that Emunah brings joy, but I also lean more toward the idea that understanding brings joy. Although it is often said that the one who knows suffers the most, I believe that the one who knows the most actually suffers less and therefore can reach joy through comprehension. So, is Emunah achieved through blind faith? No, it is achieved through understanding. There must be understanding. And I believe that the person who understands a joke is the one who has most developed their comprehension and therefore has the greatest capacity for joy. The inability to understand humor often reflects a broader lack of comprehension in a person. If someone perceives a joke as aggressive when it does not have to be, one can conclude that this person lives in a kind of inner conflict or unhappiness, which is projected outward. Therefore, I believe that what we could call the consequence or effect of humor on a person is closely linked to their level of repression, honesty, and tikkun. That is, it relates to their level of consciousness. The higher the consciousness, the better the humor. And there is no issue with humor itself, but people who lack humor or cannot connect with a certain type of humor are those with a very low level of consciousness. Higher consciousness brings both understanding and the ability to truly enjoy humor.
Well, there is a very close relationship between humor and intelligence. That is, it is impossible to have a sense of humor if a person is narrow-minded, as Baal Shem Tov said, or if a person moves from narrowness to breadth. I believe that a sense of humor implies having that capacity for understanding you were referring to. It is something that becomes evident, that clearly manifests itself.
Of course, but that's why I say it's something one needs to exercise. Because when you exercise it, you relativize and become aware. But notice, it also has to do with cultural conditioning. What kind of repression existed in your family regarding certain topics? Humor often touches on taboo subjects. Many jokes relate to religion, politics, or sexuality. And why these topics? Because they are sensitive areas that people don't usually want to talk about, and through jokes and humor, these subjects come to light. Therefore, humor is a great source of revelation. In this way, humor becomes not just entertainment, but a mirror that reveals the hidden truths of our inner and social worlds. Humor allows us to talk about topics that some people don't want to discuss.
2 more notes regarding the topic of humor. It's also worth mentioning that humor, which generates laughter, has been used by some people as a form of therapy, laughter therapy. I believe Mario Satz emphasizes that laughter can help release tension, improve mental clarity, and foster a deeper connection with oneself and others.
Exactly, he was one of the great ones. I say he was because I think he doesn't do the courses anymore. I also send Mario Satz a big hug. We love him very much. Great Kabbalist.
Totally.
Yes, a great Kabbalist of Argentine origin who has lived for many years here in Catalonia. Mario Satz conducted many laughter therapy courses, seriously, very seriously, and it made perfect sense that a Kabbalist would focus on laughter therapy because humor is a key dimension for expansive consciousness. Humor is not just entertainment, it is a profound tool for expanding awareness and cultivating inner growth.
Of course, I think we can also clearly say to get closer, because there's maybe I'm wrong, but there are times when I see that there is a dissociation between spirituality and humor bridges that gap beautifully. But we can also say that humor is a clear mechanism of revelation.
Absolutely, of course it is,
And in that sense, is closely linked to the Kabbalah.
That's right. And I realize that as the years go by, I have much more freedom in making humorous comments, especially with the students when they start my courses. It's a good way to start a class. I make many humorous comments about myself, about the other, of everyone, laughing all together in the classes when classes start. And this is an awareness that I've been having in the last few years. I was going straight to the beginning of the class, and I realized that, but I do it totally naturally. I get, let's say, this. It's not that it's prepared beforehand. I say, well, I'm going to start with humor today. No, there are times when you are tired, and I don't do it naturally either. But I see that people are getting used to it. Also, I repeat, to relativize a lot of things that if you take it to a level of self-demand, because if you take life to a level of too high self-demand, it produces a kind of wear and tear, and this relaxation of humor, this tranquility, that humor gives you as a way of escape and as a revelation, makes you live much happier. So you enter a virtuous circle because you have humor, because you feel happy, and when you take this out, you are happier, because you have an additional that you can work on, and it can be very good for you.
Nice.
In fact, at some point I said I would have to be a humorist and not a Kabbalist.
Or both.
Well, I don't know if it's that much, but the truth is that humor, I don't know, is something that is in my nature. But it has developed a lot in the last few years. I've always had humor, but what has happened to me in the last few years is a radicalization of humor. I hope I'm not a humor
Yes.
fundamentalist.
A fundamentalist.
I hope not to have a radicalization of humor.
We take this opportunity to invite people who are watching this podcast to give us your opinion, write comments.
To send us a joke.
Yes, send us a joke. Perhaps you'd prefer Mario and I take to the streets telling jokes. It wouldn't be so bad. Well, Mario, a pleasure. I've laughed a lot. And once again, it's been a true pleasure doing this podcast with
Shalom,
you.
Nacho, thank you.
Thank you. Shalom.